I've been given the impression, at least, that he's a younger guy and quite mathematically astute. But he's a real gem. He's a sharp guy, and I have to say that I really admire what he's doing. He's basically stated in the past, since the last show, that he's willing to die for a solution, and he's putting some pressure on the bad apples in Ron Paul's forum, where mathematically perfected economy is being advocated, and Austrian economics, so-called, is rightly been pronounced dead forever. Rejection of mathematics and purported economics. I mean, how preposterous can it be? So anyway, I just was going to read a couple of posts because still there are issues. I'm going to read a couple of posts by this fellow truth seeker, this gem on the Ron Paul forums. I've never even corresponded with the guy, and this guy's Citizen, is complaining that he's got to be a paid shill of me, and this kid's just learned about this recently, and yet he's taking up the battle in a valiant way. So I just want to read a few things which basically give us a basic idea, of some of these goings on. But here he is. He's personally reading Hayek now. Evidently he's listening to the show, and he's going over the faults of that in this article himself. So he writes Jake, who's anyway, he writes Jake. He says, on that note, Mr. Hayek, in that very same article, falls into the fallacy of circular logic. On one hand, he advocates the gold standard. On the other, he wants the value of money to be independent of the gold value. That is a contradiction. The gold standard simply means that the value of money will follow the value of gold, which may go up and down depending on the supply and demand of gold. He further suggests it actually depends on that circulation competing for all the other things as well, which means it's just a disaster in terms of a concept. In fact, I don't know how the founders didn't realize that. I don't. I mean, it baffles me. They didn't give us an economy. They gave us a gold standard, which condemns us to tremendous irregularity when it's an attempt, a very, very, very ill-conceived one, to impart a consistent value to money, which it can't give it. It's never existed in time, no matter how often Ron Paul claims otherwise. Okay? So, he goes on, he further suggests that the opposite dynamics take place. That is, the money issued by private establishments determine the worth value of gold. This is blatant outrage, he says, with an exclamation point. He basically advocates total power to create money by the primary power to assign the gold any subjective value the private money establishment deems appropriate. Violates the gold standard doctrine, he puts in parentheses. This is nothing short of the ultimate dream of the Rothschild and the stockholders of the Federal Reserve System. You got it. This is all about corruption. And until you get rid of the instrument of the corruption, the obfuscation of the currency, this is what you will endure. So he posts another thing to Jake. He says, I totally agree with you. College students should be able to buy property they could afford while going to school. Do you know what this guy, Republique, and another fellow, oh God, how did I forget this guy's name? It doesn't matter. You know what the objection was raised in the Daily Paul forums against one of the objections raised in the Daily Paul forums against mathematically perfected economy was? That no one would have to rent. Okay, so he's writing, college students should be able to buy a property they could afford while going to school. But if that happens, the minute it happens, the game will be over. This is what the oppressive establishments do not want to happen. I talk to many people in my friend and family circle, and they think I am nuts for saying the very same things you have just mentioned. I say to myself, oh my God, how in hell the bastards convinced us that we deserve nothing better than what we have. Actually, we have nothing. And in fact, the youngest generations don't even have a hope, you know. We have been rabid by rabid beasts. We are duplicating the oppressor. We like the victimizer so much we are in denial of their wrongdoings. Our condition is so severe that needs professional help, but not the kind which only profits from our miseries. We need to restore the confidence to all people that they are dignified without exception and that they all deserve happiness, something the Constitution guarantees us. What we are dealing with here is not just economics like what the tone of this debate has been sounding. What we are dealing with is liberty and the loss of liberty. We are no longer free people. We lost the taste of liberty inasmuch as a blind that lost a vision of the world, of the real world. We need foremost to bring people to that sense of liberty, to remind them how sweet it feels to finally be free. We need them to come back with pride and determination that they are the people, not the criminal elite, which have been fostered in satanic philosophies geared towards the ultimate destruction of all mankind. We need to stand up this time to Satan and declare war on the whole camp. Yes, we can do it, and we will be all honored to be recruited as soldiers in the fight. Well, that's the kind of talk that made this country. Now, all that's good that's going on there isn't perfect, and I just want to relate to part of this because if we don't understand what the scope of mathematically perfected economy is and what the scope of absolute consensual representation is, we can get off on some wrong tacks. And this post is posted by the same person who, proudly announced that we'd come to the same conclusions, and then turns out that money can't be a debt. And I'm going to begin in the middle of this post to save some time, but he says, the bottom line is that currency is an absolutely essential public necessity in order to enable each and every member of the population to trade with each other and generate private production and services for their own benefit. And if it is to do this, all aspects of the currency itself must be under public management, and it must be issued in a form in which it can enable this to the greatest extent possible as well, which of course is exactly what mathematically perfected economy accomplishes. And we can determine that by evaluating how it is possible to inflict any injustice upon anyone. There is no other way to maintain immutable tokens of value, which have no extrinsic cost whatsoever, and that's it. So we've satisfied this, and it's good. Evidently he understands this, and that's not the part that we have a contention with. Any function in its management and initial distribution which is currently provided by banks can be provided by the people to themselves just as easily and far more efficiently as a simple public service. Of course, good. And this is this thing that, I advocate, this common monetary foundry. I can't imagine any other useful purpose for an economy. Absolutely. In terms of government, right now we have government established in service of the banks, Once the banks are gone, then the only possible incentive for government is to do whatever they have to in order to give us what we need to max out that useful trade and production to the greatest extent possible, as it's as good for them as it is for us. Well, that's kind of senseless rambling there. I don't make much sense out of that. But if you'll forget about economics and look at and consider some of the common sense proposals. Now there are there differing common sense proposals? This bothers me, I see already, which have been made toward actually engineering a system which can actually do this. I think they will make sense to you, just as the alternate currency idea make perfect sense to me as well. And I think both should be used in order to provide efficient and useful function in different respects. Well, here's the problem, when you start talking like this. You're not saying exactly what's wrong with anything, or exactly how anything else accomplishes anything, and how those objects are exactly how those objects are beneficial to us. So then you're talking about an alternate currency. Which ones, I don't know. Maybe I would if I followed this thread carefully. And you're saying to combine things. You're saying, and I think both should be used in order to provide efficient and useful function in different respects. Well, you don't just think this way. If you're solving a problem, you let the facts lead you to solution. Okay? And if it's a proof of singular solution, you leave it that way. You don't combine it with something else. You don't adulterate it. You don't compromise it. You don't make it something it never was. You pay a guy to put a show paint job on your vehicle, and he's an ace car painter. You don't go right in the paint booth and put your hands all over it right afterward. This is nonsense. At least give us an idea why you would do this. What makes it a better solution to compromise it or adulterate it with some other things which are not even saying what those things are? It's as if this person just feels left out if they can't be involved in authoring a solution which has already been authored, you see. And many people feel that way, but that's a wrong thing. You want to put your handprints on it and make it a different thing. And if you're not satisfied with it if you didn't tear it this way or tear it that way. The person that solves a problem doesn't tear anything anyway themselves. They let the facts dictate solution. And once you have it, it's like if the other guy over there is trying to do the same thing and you've just figured out how to manipulate all this stuff and get it assembled, in the fastest way and do it right. You pass the information on to him and they do it too. You don't say, well, I was doing the wrong thing over here. I didn't develop that solution, so I'm going to do it half my way still. Well, people do that, but then they can't be as efficient as this other person. But when you're talking about affecting the rest of the people, this is something to be extremely cautious about. If somebody presents a proposition of singular solution, you don't just go say, well, let's change that because I didn't get my hand in there. Or there's this other person and I haven't been around for 40 years and I don't know they're a plagiarist and they're just faking it all the way and they've turned 180 degrees in the last 2 years. But I want to involve them too because I like their name or I read their book, and I think they started all this when in fact they came along 40 years later, when they in fact argued against every fact of solution which just the most rudimentarily skilled mathematician would accept as obvious facts, and they argue against these things. These other people who purportedly have solution. After my first program, I had people calling me from Europe to tell me in detail, what a neophyte Ellen Hodgson Brown is. She's just out there, thinking that she can bounce all around like this, vacillate like hell. She's all over the map, and she's representing solution. All she's really after is attention, as far as I can see, and money, So he goes on. He says, my own take on MPE itself. I detailed it in a post A made